Tēnā koutou katoa and hello everybody. Welcome to the Lentil Intervention Podcast. My name is Ben Adelberg and I'm coming to you from Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland.
And g'day, I'm Emma Strutt and I'm currently coming to you from Gungaloo Country in Queensland. And before we dive into the conversation today, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connection to land, sea and community.
The Lentil Intervention is an Australasian educational and advocacy platform dedicated to raising awareness about the current climate and health crisis.
And on this podcast, we invite guests to chat about topics that will inspire you to take action to improve your own health and the health of the planet.
So please subscribe to and share this podcast and visit our website for the full show notes.
And don't forget to buy us a coffee if you'd like to support our work.
Season 2, episode 40, and we're back with the Evidence-Based Eating New Zealand series of health-focused public lectures that are being delivered around New Zealand. Episodes 18 to 20 were the Dunedin-based lectures, episodes 30 to 32 were Christchurch, and now we're bringing to you the Auckland-based series titled Focus on Hospitals that was held on the 9th of October. Unfortunately, due to COVID lockdown, this was streamed online, but still a great session to attend.
So in this episode, we bring you the recording of dietitian Fuchsia Goldsmith's lecture. Here she speaks about nutrition and long-term health and sharing her experiences as a registered dietitian working with people who want to get well. And if you like what you hear, be sure to check out Fuchsia's previous episode with us, which is episode 14 of this season.
So today what I wanted to talk about with this topic was I wanted to have a check-in about how our health is in Aotearoa, how are we tracking, how can we effectively improve the health of Kiwis, what is the best diet for health, and there'll be no surprises there. I think we've sort of covered that a predominantly plant-based diet is going to be hugely beneficial. And as a dietitian, I'm just going to give my perspective on and some suggestions on how to get started with a plant-based diet and how to maintain a healthy plant-based diet, because it can be quite a big change for some people, and making sure that you're getting all of the right nutrients is really important. So I just wanted to start off with this whakatauki. You've probably heard it before, but I think it's really important to remember. And the reason that we're talking about health and well-being is for our communities. I'm going to talk about a few of the stats in terms of our health. And I think it's really important to remember that each statistic represents a person. So I wanted to start off by sharing this whakatauki. So this is how it goes. He aha te mea nui o te ao. He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. What is the most important thing in the world? It is people, it is people, it is people. And I think our communities have shown such resilience over the last couple of years in our response to this COVID-19 that is in our communities, and we've shown so much strength and so much capacity, change and doing good. And I think it would be awesome if we could channel some of this energy into improving the health of our communities in terms of nutrition and lifestyle too. So I'm going to dive straight in here with the heavy hitters on a Saturday night. But I think it's really important to understand why we're talking about nutrition and diet. So these statistics, this actually comes from the World Health Organization report that was done in 2018. And what it shows is that for the most part, what's killing Kiwis is non-communicable diseases. So things like cardiovascular disease, cancers, and diabetes. And these diseases are hugely influenced by diet and lifestyle. So while it is quite shocking to see these statistics in terms of what is killing us, there's also a lot of power in this too, because a lot of the risk factors for these diseases are modifiable. They are within our capacity to change. So that's really cool. And just when I'm talking about these statistics as well, I just want to bring it back as well to the fact that, each data point is a person, and is somebody's aunt, uncle, mother, father, son, daughter. And so it's really important to sort of keep that in mind when we are looking at these statistics. These are people in our communities. So this is lifted from the Ministry of Health website, and this just sort of reinforces that picture from before. And you can see here that the major causes of death in New Zealand are there's a lot in there that is influenced by diet and modifiable. So how's our health looking at the moment? There is a lot of room for improvement. At the moment, 1 in 3 adults in New Zealand are classified as obese, and there's huge differences in terms of our obesity rates depending on ethnicity as well. So we've got 2 in 3 Pacific adults and 1 in 2 Māori adults. So there's some quite big disparities there between ethnicity too. We also know that 1 in 10 kids are obese, which is quite shocking when you think about it. We know that more than 1 in 4 adults have more than one chronic condition. 1 in 20 people, adults in our communities, have heart disease, and 1 in 17 have type 2 diabetes, which is huge. So with these deaths, how much of it is avoidable? So this World Health Organization report actually sort of delves into that a little bit, and it estimates that 10% of these deaths annually are actually premature deaths. So that equates to 31,000 people. And those 31,000 people are people in our communities, they're our family members, they're our friends. And so it's really important that we are looking to see what we can do to help reduce this. The risk factors that are modifiable that the World Health Organization identifies are alcohol consumption, physical inactivity, eating too much salt, tobacco use, raised blood pressure, diabetes, and obesity. So you can see that a lot of this is highly modifiable. Of course, it's not always the case, but there's a lot of power for change here too. So what do we need to do to improve the health of Kiwis? I've decided to sort of focus more on the nutrition side, because I know Boyd will have a lot to talk about in terms of our health, our food environment. And I know that Mark is looking to delve into a bit more of the nitty-gritty science. So I'm going to focus more on the nutrition side. So what we know works is eating more whole foods, such as vegetables, fruits, whole grains, plant proteins, nuts, seeds, and eating less of that ultra-processed food, refined carbohydrates, salt, saturated fat, and sugars. It's important to exercise regularly, avoid excess amounts of alcohol, and avoid smoking. So what is the best diet for health? The best diet for health is a predominantly plant-based diet, a diet that is made up mostly of plants. So the most research for health benefits comes from diets that are greater than 85% plants and mostly whole foods. So these include diets such as the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet as well. These can all be classified as predominantly plant diets. And it's also important to consider what is going to work for you. So what is going to be sustainable for you and enjoyable for you for life. There's no point making a change today that you're not prepared to sustain for the rest of your life. Diet is it's a long game. So it's important to find the right balance for you. So a predominantly plant-based diet is the best diet for health. And I just wanted to pull out this quote as well, because I think it's quite striking. This came from Harvard Medical School, and they stated that 1 in 3 early deaths could be prevented by following a predominantly plant-based diet, and that's quite powerful when you think about it, just through what you're eating, and also quite powerful because that's something that you can change. That is within your control, and you can change day to day. So the term plant-based diet has a variety of different definitions to different people. So it is quite a loose term, and it has been used to describe any diet from a plant-exclusive diet or strict vegan diet through to a diet where someone is trying to include more plants. So that could be something as simple as trying out a meat-free Monday. So there's no real strict definition of a plant-based diet, which can be a little bit confusing. So a plant-based diet, if we're talking about a healthy plant-based diet, it will be focused on whole grains, legumes, fruits, vegetables, and small amounts of nuts and seeds. It's also really important to consider the quality of a plant-based diet, because following a plant-based diet that is not of good quality, like maybe might be including a lot of sort of plant-based junk foods or hyper-processed foods, is actually not going to give you the same benefit. Which seems reasonably logical, but I think it's really important to raise. Historically, it would be very difficult to follow a plant-based diet that is not nutritious and balanced. But over the last sort of 10 years, especially in New Zealand, I think food industry has absolutely latched onto this term of plant-based, and we've seen a huge explosion in the number of foods available on our shelves that are plant-based or vegan, but really not that nutritionally valuable. So for one example of this would be like Oreos are technically a vegan food, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are health promoting. Especially these days, you still need to take some caution with the products that you are choosing on a plant-based diet too. When considering a plant-based diet, I think it's best to use a little bit of a traffic light approach in a sense. Focus on what you want to eat most of, which will be those whole plant-based foods, like your fruits, vegetables, grains, plant proteins, nuts, seeds. That's what we want to focus our efforts on. And then you might want to have like some oils if that's something that you include, and then you might want to be aiming to eat less of your meats and your more processed proteins as well. So I think it's really important not to completely vilify foods, and just sort of keep a pragmatic approach in terms of what is going to work for you every day. I think often I see people being too strict on themselves and then tripping and falling and finding it really hard to get back on the wagon again. So it's really important to sort of work out what is going to fit for you and your lifestyle. Including 85% plants, 85% seems to be our magic number at the moment, will give you a lot of the benefits of a plant-based diet. I think there is growing research to support a stricter approach, but most of the benefits can actually be had from having 85% plants. So there's a huge amount of power in that. And even just swapping out one meal in a week is actually associated with, for example, like reduced risks of kidney disease. So even just making a small adjustment to your diet can actually see some quite big health gains longer term. So with plant-based diets, like I said, they do have quite a loose definition. So I also talk about plant-exclusive diets, which are more your vegan diets. And this leads into the statement, whenever I'm talking about sort of strict vegan diets, I like to throw this in because I often find that I get questions about whether a vegan diet is safe and appropriate. And it absolutely is. Like any diet, it does need some level of appropriate planning. But I just like to pull out this quote from the American Dietetics Association, which was released in 2003, endorsing plant-based diets and vegan diets as healthy, nutritionally adequate, and providing health benefits by preventing and managing certain diseases. So they're a real powerful tool in our arsenal of dietary interventions to protect our health. So, how does a plant-based diet compare to a standard diet? There's a few differences between the two. So, plant-based diets typically are higher in quite a few of the vitamins and minerals, so things like vitamin A, C, E, and K. One of the big differences is that they are higher in fiber. And this is extremely important because fiber is actually one of the most common deficiencies in the Western world, and it's one that we don't often talk enough about. But it's incredibly important, and with all that's coming out on gut health, I think fiber is starting to get its time in the limelight. A plant-based diet is also typically higher in folate, potassium, magnesium. It is also typically higher in iron, although the significance of this is a little bit different. So there's two different forms of iron that we get from our foods. There is heme iron, which comes from our animal-based foods, and there's non-heme iron, which comes from our plant-based foods. So we get a lot more non-heme iron by eating more plants. So our total amount of iron is actually higher on a plant-based diet. However, the absorption of that plant-based iron is different to the absorption of the animal-based iron. And so the net effect is that we end up with the same outcome. So what we see is that people who follow a strict vegan diet compared to people following a standard diet actually have no difference in rates of iron deficiency, which is the key endpoint, I guess, for measuring iron. Plant-based diets do also typically have more omega-6, more antioxidants, whole grains, and nuts and seeds. And the reason I've listed those sort of as food groups is because both whole grains and nut and seed intake have been associated with quite a lot of beneficial health effects. What plant-based diets have less of is the saturated fat, the cholesterol, and the trans fat, so things that are damaging to our cardiovascular health. Plant-based diets also typically have less calories, although you can still achieve the same amount of calories, but plant-based foods typically are less calorie dense. And this is part of why we see people generally lose a bit of weight when they start following a plant-based diet or a plant-exclusive diet. And that is because the foods have lower calorie density and more fiber, which keeps you feeling full. Also, the volume of food that you need to eat to get the same amount of calories is generally larger. So while you can keep the calories the same, typically calorie intake is reduced on a plant-based diet. Plant-based diets can also result in a lower protein intake, although there's lots that we can do to sort of account for that. Plant-based diets are exclusively plant diets are also lower in vitamin B12 And when I'm working with clients, that is one thing that I am sort of non-negotiable on, and that is that if you're following a plant-exclusive diet, you do need to supplement B12 and get your B12 levels checked. A plant-based diet may also have a little bit less zinc and omega-3s, but there are definitely ways that we can navigate that to make sure that we're getting all of the nutrients that we need. But on the whole, what we can see is that there are a lot of positives there for the plant-based diet. So these are the key nutrients that we need to think about. So when it comes to protein, our plant proteins just they have a different nutritional makeup to our animal proteins, and as a result, we need to make sure that we eat larger quantities of them, and we may need to reduce our carb portions as well. And that is because your plant-based proteins have less. Your plant-based proteins have more carbohydrate in them, so we need to balance it out on our plate in a different way. It's also important to make sure that B12 is supplemented if you're following a plant-exclusive diet, and that you're taking some foods that are high in omega-3s. Iron can also be thought about, but again, iron, I think, is something that on the whole, as a population across New Zealand, is really important to think about regardless of what sort of diet you are following, because iron deficiency rates in New Zealand are very high. So regardless of what sort of diet you're following, iron should be something that's considered. Calcium and vitamin D are also really important, and you can get your calcium from foods like fortified plant milks, foods like molasses and tahini, and vitamin D from getting a bit of sunshine too. So zinc is another mineral that is really important, and getting plenty of whole grains and nuts and seeds will help to make sure you're ticking that box. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about getting started on a plant-based diet, because it can seem a little bit daunting. So I thought I would share a few suggestions on how to go about starting a plant-based diet. So I guess my tips here are to start off by focusing on the easy wins. So you might want to write down, for example, what you eat for a couple of days, just so that you've got a good understanding of where you're at in the beginning. And perhaps then you can go through and highlight all of the plants. And what you'll probably notice is that there's actually quite a few foods that you're already eating that are plant-based. So identify those easy wins, the foods that you already like, and see how you can build on those going forward. I think it's great to aim for progress and not perfection too. It can take time to build skills in cooking plant-based meals. They're not difficult to make, but it just takes a bit of an adjustment. If you're used to cooking meat and dairy products, it does take a bit of, it's a slightly different way of cooking, and it just takes a little bit of practice. And one really good way to be able to build those skills is to get a little leg up from something like the plant-based My Food Bag or Kai Box. They're not nutritionally perfect, but they're certainly better than a lot of other things that might go on the table. And they can be a really good way of just learning how to cook plant-based meals that are going to be really delicious. I think it's also really good to sort of lean on your herbs and spices. So I guess just like if you were cooking up some chicken or something like that, you'd want to season it and add herbs and spices to make it taste good. So it's the same with things like tofu and chickpeas and beans. So lean on your herbs and spices. So for example, some of the ones that I really love are I like making like roasted chickpeas in the air fryer with smoked paprika and sumac and just a little bit of cumin. That's probably one of my favorites. And I like roasting up my tofu with a bit of turmeric, cumin and sumac as well, and serving that with some veggies as part of a salad. So there's lots of herbs and spices that you can add to give good flavour to your food. When you're thinking about how to structure a meal as well, it looks a little bit different when you're following a plant-based diet. So you may have seen this image on the left before. This is sort of the typical recommendation that dietitians will give out to help people balance their meals a bit better. And you'll see that half of the plate is typically vegetables. A quarter of the plate is protein, and this is referring to animal protein, and we would usually educate on sort of trying to limit to a palm-sized portion. And then that last quarter is your carbs, and usually we would talk to people about trying to limit to a fist-sized portion of your carbohydrates. And that works really well if you're eating meat. But if you are wanting to create a nutritious and balanced plant-based meal, we need to change things around a little bit. So this image on the right is one of mine. So I encourage people to choose calcium-rich foods from each of these different food groups to help ensure that they're getting enough calcium. And you'll see that the lines have kind of moved a little bit. So we're still aiming to get about a quarter of your plate of plant proteins. But when I'm saying proteins on this side, I'm meaning more your lentils, your chickpeas, and tofu. And then you'll see that little wedge there. Those are nuts and seeds, and they will give you some healthy fats, some minerals, and they'll also give you a bit more protein. So there's a reasonable portion of that too. You'll see the carbohydrate portion has been reduced quite a bit there too. And that is because we're getting some carbs from our plant proteins already. So with your carbs, the portion just goes down a little bit, and I recommend that you choose whole grain options because they're going to be higher in B vitamins and minerals, which is important regardless of what sort of diet you're following. Lastly, on the left-hand side of that little plate model, we've got our fruits and veggies, and you can kind of mix and match this a bit. It doesn't necessarily have to be strict on where that line sits, but essentially you want to aim to have half of your plate being non-starchy vegetables. So that would be things like your baby spinach or some sliced capsicum or any sort of non-starchy vegetables. What I do encourage people to do is to add some fruit to that side of their plate. And the reason for that is that fruits are typically higher in vitamin C, and they have a little bit of sugar in them, naturally occurring sugar. And having that little bit of fruits, it could be as simple as a squeeze of lime juice if fruits on the dinner plate are a little bit scary. And what that does is it enhances your absorption of things like iron and other minerals. So that is why I've popped it on that side there too. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea as to how to put together a plant-based meal. So there's just an extra component there, and we just move the lines a little bit there too. So then we come to what should I eat? So we've kind of got the theory there, but what does it actually end up looking like on your plate? I thought I would share some images of foods and meals that I've made, and I guess just a bit of a disclaimer as well. Everyone's plate will look very different, and that's because we all eat differently. We have different portions and different nutrition needs, but these are just a few pictures of meals that I've made and recipes that I've shared sort of up on Instagram. But what I want to show you is just that it isn't super daunting to try out eating more plants, and it's a lot easier and appealing than perhaps people might at first think. So these are a couple of my breakfasts that I've got here. And I have a bit of a checklist that goes through my mind when I'm putting together my breakfast meals. I want to make sure that I'm including a protein source at breakfast. That could be something as simple as some soy milk in my oats. It could be soy milk in a smoothie. It could be some scrambled tofu on toast, or even just a dollop of peanut butter on my oats as well. So there's lots of different ways that you can get protein in at breakfast time, but it is important to try and get at least one protein source in there. I also like to tick a few things off for the day in the morning as well. I aim to have, and this is something that I apply for all of the meal plans that I do as well. So I aim to include 2 to 3 Brazil nuts, and that is because they're very high in selenium, and selenium is a mineral that's quite low in our soils in New Zealand. So having 2 to 3 Brazil nuts just ticks that box. You know you've got your selenium, and they're kind of a little bit like nature's multivitamin in that sense. So they're really good for selenium. So I like to get that ticked off at the beginning of the day as well. It's also important to get an omega-3 rich food. So if you're not eating fish and eggs, you need to get your omega-3s from another place. And you can get omega-3s from quite a few of our seeds and a couple of our nuts. So the foods that I include for omega-3 are flax seeds, chia seeds, and hemp hearts. Walnuts are also quite good for omega-3s. So lastly, I try to make sure that there's at least one serve of fruit or vegetables in the meal at breakfast time. Lunch and dinner typically sort of can look reasonably similar, but at lunch and dinner time, I think it's good to aim to have half of your plate of vegetables. And you can see in these sort of examples, I've used a variety: broccoli, carrot, cabbage, cucumber, bok choy, sweet corn, you name it. Just so try and get a variety of different colours as well if you can. Aim to get a little bit of fruit or a squeeze of lemon or lime juice. So lemons and lime is something that I always keep in my fruit bowl, just so that it can easily be added to meals. Make sure that more than a quarter of your plate is your plant protein. So in these images here, I've got a bit of like a tofu poke bowl, and I've got some TVP that I've used to make a ramen up the top there. So trying to get more than a quarter of your plate plant proteins. And then you can boost those proteins by adding a sprinkle of seeds. So so in these situations, I've used sesame seeds, but you can use any seeds that you like, and the more the better in terms of variety. So for example, if you're wanting to get a greater variety of plants in your diets, one really good hack is just putting together your own little seed mix. And you could put like a variety of maybe 4 or 5 different seeds in there. And then with just a sprinkle, you can actually get a huge number more plants in per meal. And we know that eating a larger variety of plants is also really good for our gut health. So that's a nice little hack that you can do. I personally have my little savory sprinkle jar that's filled with nuts and seeds that I add there, and also a little breakfast sprinkle jar that has like hemp seeds and cacao nibs and all sorts of little bits that I can easily add there. Lastly, I think it's really important to choose a variety of those whole grains for those extra B vitamins and for zinc. So having some quinoa, some sorghum, really grainy bread, a good variety is really helpful to make sure that you're getting all of your nutrition needs. So with snacks, I think it's great to choose mostly fresh fruit and vegetables where you can, and then to choose some proteins like a handful of nuts or seeds. And I guess like I said earlier, the crispy chickpeas are a really good option as well, just because they've got a little bit less fat in them naturally than say nuts and seeds, so you can have a larger amount of them. So if you haven't got an air fryer, I highly recommend trying it out, because it definitely makes it really easy to prepare things like that. And in this image here, I've got some seed crackers. So you can see that they're just made up with a bunch of different seeds. Like these ones have 4 different types of seeds and just water. And because they've got chia seeds in them, that sort of gels it all together. So you just pop it out on a piece of baking paper and bake it for about 10 minutes, and it all gels together and forms a seed cracker. So yeah, those are some examples of things that I often include and sort of plan in for people's diets. Yeah, I just wanted to stress that eating more plants is easier than you think, and you're probably eating more plants than you might think as well. So, so I think hopefully you've picked up a few things about plant-based nutrition. I know I've sort of focused mostly on, I guess, that nutrition counselling sort of side of things, but there is also huge opportunities to make access to good food better, and access to advice on nutrition a lot better. So I'm sure Boyd will cover that in his talk as well, but I also just wanted to bring attention to a study that was done sort of earlier this year by Dietitians New Zealand. And I think one of our biggest frustrations as dietitians is that there is essentially very little funding for educating people about nutrition, really until people have very serious health conditions. And if we had more opportunities to have talks with people about good nutrition before it got to that stage, we could have such a massive impact in terms of improving people's health and quality of life, and helping people live healthier for longer. So Dietitians New Zealand did a study earlier this year and showed that for every $1 spent on dietitians today, 99 was saved over a 5-year period. So I think it's really important that we get more dietitians sitting alongside GPs rather than in hospitals, so that we can actually be there to support people in changing their diets before it's too late. So I guess, I just wanted to sort of share that thought as well. Any questions today?
Right. Thank you. That was excellent. Thanks, Fuchsia. There are a lot of good thoughts there, and a lot of good nutrition tips as well. I think we've only got time for maybe 1 or 2 at the most questions. If you want to put up your hand, I see there's a hand of clapping, but there's also a hand reaction down there, hand rise. If you click on that, if you've got a question. I'm just clicking through the pages now to see if I can see any hands. Oh, there's one there from Peter. Peter, you want to turn your mic on and ask your question?
Hi, greetings from Adelaide. Fuchsia, since going whole food, plant-based, no oil, my diets comprise mostly cooked vegetables. What sort of proportion of fresh salads should I be eating together with those cooked veggies?
Oh yeah, I think when it comes to your veggie intake, what works, what you're going to enjoy the most is going to be the best answer for you. So if you're someone that really enjoys cooked vegetables, you can have quite minimal amounts of raw vegetables, and that's going to be okay, because if you're trying to force yourself to eat something that you're not enjoying as much, you're probably going to eat less of it. So the quantity of the vegetables is quite important. Having said that, when we cook vegetables, you do lose certain water-soluble nutrients, I guess, especially if you're steaming or boiling. But if you're having a variety and having some baked, that will also help to reduce the amount of nutrients that you would lose from those two.
Thank you for listening to the Lentil Intervention Podcast. If you found this interesting, make sure you subscribe and share it with your friends.